Perfect Blue is a movie from Studio Madhouse which premiered at the Fantasia Film Festival in Montreal, Canada on August 5th, 1997. The film was based off of the novel Perfect Blue: Complete Metamorphosis by Yoshikazu Takeuchi and was originally intended to be in live action. However, the Kobe earthquake of 1995 caused damage to the production studio, and as a result, the movie received a budget cut to 90 million yen. Moreover, it was turned into an original video animation project, and the film was directorially handed to the, at the time, relatively unknown Satoshi Kon, who would go on to become one of anime's most beloved and well-renowned creators among the ranks of Katsuhiro Otomo and Hayao Miyazaki, at least before his untimely death at the harrowingly young age of 46. Memento is a movie from the production of Summit Entertainment, premiered at the 57th Venice International Film Festival on September 5th, 2000. Memento was originally pitched in 1995 by television producer, director, and author Jonathan Nolan to his brother Christopher Nolan, who is also a film director, producer, and screenwriter. Christopher, inspired by his brother's idea, created a screenplay based on the same premise, and months after writing his script, decided to put a twist on the story which ultimately defined how it would be remembered in cinema's cultural consciousness. In 1997, Christopher's girlfriend would present his screenplay to an executive at Newmarket Films, and soon after, the project was greenlit and given a budget of $4.5 million. The differences between the productions of these two films are immense beyond the obvious fact that they were made in two completely different parts of the world. One was given a comfortable budget and time constraints, and the other had neither. One's story was adapting a pre-existing source material, while the other was a comparatively original idea. One was live action, and the other was animation, etc. And yet, when I watched each of these films recently, I found that my experiences with the two were disturbingly similar. Both movies are very confusing upon a first watch. Both movies concern themselves with many of the same thematic concepts, and both movies communicate their respective narratives with a layer of intentional ambiguity, leading many audience members to have diverging interpretations of each of their stories. However, the commonalities between these films don't end with such surface-level observations, and to explain how, I'm going to need to go into a little bit more detail. Since both of these movies are more than 20 years old, and since there are likely a lot of you who haven't seen at least one of these movies, I think it would be best to start with a quick recap of each of their premises. Perfect Blue follows Mima Kirigoe, a Japanese idol who is part of the J-pop group Cham. At the beginning of the film, she decides to leave the group so that she can advance her career into the acting industry, which upsets many of her fans because it disrupts the innocent Barbie doll-like persona which they had constructed of her, especially after she starts involving herself in some more explicit media. As the film progresses, Mima finds herself more and more unable to get a grasp of her own identity as a result of the conflicting messages that are being spread online from someone impersonating her, the eerily fitting identities she is becoming immersed in through her acting, and the identity which she attempts to keep hold of in her personal life. Memento follows Leonard Shelby, a man who suffers from anterograde amnesia, a condition causing him to be unable to form new long-term memories. The last thing he does remember is the night that a pair of robbers broke into his home, raped his wife, and killed her. This being his last memory, Leonard sets out to track down the culprit himself and kill him using Polaroid photos, notes, and tattoos on his body to keep track of his one-man investigation despite his condition. And here's the part that the movie is famous for, it follows Leonard's journey to do so in reverse chronological order. And all while this is happening, the film is interspersed with a phone call he is having in which he tells the story of a man named Sammy, who evidently had the same condition as Leonard. With such staggeringly different premises, it might seem strange to hear that I had such a similar experience with both of these films. But to get you to begin to understand where I'm coming from, I'd like to pose this question. What creates intrigue in a film? Answer: questions. More specifically, intrigue is created by the anticipation of the answers to the questions that a film proposes. And yes, I know that's a bit of a mouthful. Now, no rule is absolute when it comes to storytelling, but I still think this fundamental conceit of what creates intrigue in a film best describes the philosophy that both Perfect Blue and Memento use to keep their audiences engaged. Of course, this idea is most blatantly apparent in Memento, seeing as the film begins with a reversed sequence of our main character shooting a man in the head. Immediately, the audience is primed to wonder, who is this man Leonard just shot? Why did Leonard take a Polaroid photo of the body? How did we get into this situation? And as Memento progresses, we slowly learn the answers to these questions, although some are more clear-cut than others. All the while, the movie introduces even more questions to the audience. Who is this Sammy character that Leonard is talking about on the phone, and why is he relevant? Who is Natalie, and why does her photo have a note scribbled out? How long has it been since Leonard's wife died, and how long has it been since he started hunting her killer? Memento is nearly 2 hours long, however, it managed to keep me interested the entire way through by playing off of my curiosity, with the clearest example of this occurring roughly 2/3 of the way into the movie.
Write this down, write down what happened, write it down, come on, concentrate, give it your mind, find a pen.
By starting the scene with Leonard desperately searching for a pen, it becomes clear that something very important just happened which he is now at risk of forgetting. Following this, Natalie enters the scene with a bleeding mouth and lip. She tells Leonard about how she tried to talk to Dodd, a drug dealer, according to Leonard's instructions, and how he beat her in response. Throughout this scene, a number of suspicious elements are included that tip the viewer off to the possibility that more could be going on that we are currently being shown. For example, Natalie says that Leonard told her to go talk to Dodd, and she apparently went along with this plan despite knowing that Todd is a dangerous guy. Leonard notices something about his hand that he is clearly confused about, and since nothing seems visibly wrong with it, and based on the way he opens and closes it, it is safe to assume that it has something to do with how his hand feels. Most damningly though, Leonard was unable to find a pen at the beginning of the scene, but later on, where does Natalie look to find something to write down information about Dodd with but her own purse? The audience already knows that this is her house. She knows about Leonard's condition, and yet she is the only one with knowledge of where a pen is. The odds that a viewer would fully process all of that information on the first watch is low. Hell, I completely forgot about the cut of Leonard looking down at his hand until I went back through the movie while writing this script. However, there's a good chance that at least one of these things would be a blip on the radar of a typical audience member. And so when the next scene reveals that Natalie is actually a total cunt and that she had been manipulating Leonard ever since she found out about his condition, the miniature puzzle pieces that had been set up in the minutes prior fall into place.
Write this down, write down what happened, write it down, come on, concentrate, give it your mind, find a pen.
Fuck Leonard. Dodd beat the shit out of me.
Why?
Why? Because of you? Because I did what you told me to do. Go to him reason with the
Calm
tell
down.
about Teddy. Great fucking idea.
Calm down.
Help me.
How?
Get rid of Dodd for me.
What?
Kill him. I'll pay you.
What do you think I am? I'm not gonna kill someone for money.
I can say whatever the fuck I want. And you won't remember. We'll still be best friends. Or maybe even lovers.
So on top of the overarching questions about the greater narrative, Memento poses and answers smaller questions on a scene-by-scene basis, and this, I feel, adds a sense of repeating build-up and payoffs throughout the film. Similarly, Perfect Blue introduces a handful of broader questions about its story early on, and as the movie progresses, keeps you on your toes by repeatedly placing scenes in misleading or confusing settings, only to later reveal the true nature of the events you just saw play out. In Perfect Blue, this scene-by-scene subversion of the audience's perception of reality is indebatably the foundational structure of the film's third act. Consider the chase sequence between Mima and a hallucination of her pop idol self. After entering the recording studio of her old pop idol group, Mima sees a vision of her stage identity, runs out of the room, into the streets, and suddenly gets hit by an oncoming truck. Except none of that actually happened. Upon impact with the truck, Mima wakes up safe and sound in her regular apartment, revealing that what we just witnessed was actually a result of Mima's steadily developing schizophrenia. And just like Memento, Perfect Blue clues the audience into the notion that they don't have all the information yet before relinquishing the details of what actually happened. Notice how as the scene progresses deeper and deeper into the studio building, Mima becomes enveloped in harsher and harsher tones of red, a color color that not only universally indicates distress, but has also been established as a color which symbolizes Mima's deteriorating grip on reality. I mean, the movie is called Perfect Blue, blue being a color of trustworthiness and thus, in this case, reality. The film is about Mima's journey towards getting a decisive or perfect grip on her own reality, her own perfect blue. Furthermore, the hallucination that Mima chases is not acknowledged by anyone other than her, which tells the audience that she is nothing more than a hallucination. This is reinforced by the way that she seems oblivious to the laws of gravity, skipping around her environment as if she were on the moon. She is also untouched by the rain, whereas our Mima gets soaking wet, and of course, she is drawn in a completely different color palette. Even in the seconds before Mima wakes up, the film delivers one last indicator that this is all going on inside Mima's head, by showing us that the person driving the truck is Mamoru Uchida, the same obsessed fan who had been stalking her since the beginning of the film. Perfect Blue is filled with these kinds of scenes, and just like Memento, they do a lot to keep the film engaging by precisely managing the drip feed of information the audience has access to. Both movies are the experiential equivalent of walking into your living room on a Christmas day, seeing a box with your name on it, and trying to figure out what could possibly be inside by investigating its size, picking it up, and shaking it. Then you get to open the present and experience either the satisfaction of knowing you guessed what it would be, or the surprise of having your expectations thoroughly subverted. Only instead of being rewarded with toys or games or candy, you are rewarded with betrayal, psychotic breakdowns, and themes that make you question if you really even know what is and isn't real. So that's fun. But let's talk a bit about those themes. Even if you haven't seen either of these movies, you probably still could have gathered that both Memento and Perfect Blue deal with messages of uncertainty or questioning what is real, and I do think that that's an integral aspect of what they are trying to tell their viewers, but I feel that I've already demonstrated this through the individual examples I've broken down from each movie. Moreover, there are already plenty of other people who have analyzed the themes of both Memento and Perfect Blue, so rather than go over those same points, I'd like to explore a less recognized aspect of each of these films thematically. And that is how both films comment on and criticize identitarianism. Both Mima and Leonard are pressured by some external force to act in a certain way. Mima is confronted by online depictions of herself insisting that the pop idol Mima is the real Mima, and Leonard is guided through life by pictures, notes, and tattoos that were created by his past self which he can no longer remember. Both of these characters are surrounded by exterior messages telling them this is who you are, this is what you do, this is how you should act. And I posit that both films demonstrate the same core ideology in how they reward or punish their respective main characters depending on how the main characters react to those external messages. In Memento, Leonard eagerly accepts and follows along with the script that is given to him, to the point that he is willing to kill innocent people based on nothing other than the fact that he has a note saying to do so. At the end of the film, which is actually the beginning of the film chronologically speaking, Teddy tells Leonard that he already killed John G., the man who raped and murdered his wife over a year ago, and that Leonard forgot. He says that since then, he had been helping Leonard hunt down new John G's for various reasons that always benefited Teddy, but also because it gave Leonard a purpose to live for. Now, Teddy is far from a reliable source of information, but whether what he says is true or not doesn't change what's really important about this scene for the purposes of this analysis. That Leonard seriously considers the validity of what Teddy is telling him. Leonard is faced with the critical question of whether to allow himself to forget what Teddy told him and continue living his life according to the notes which he leaves himself, or to attempt to break the continuous cycle of searching for the man that killed his wife, whether that man is still alive or not. And...
Can I just let myself forget what you've told me? Can I just let myself forget what you've made me do? You think I just want another puzzle to solve? Another John G to look for? You're John G, so you can be my John G. Do I lie to myself to be happy? In your case, Teddy, yes, I will.
By choosing to keep himself in the dark and follow the instructions given to him which say that he has not yet accomplished his goal and that he needs to be hunting down Janji, whoever that may be, Leonard directly puts the well-being of other people and his own well-being into jeopardy. It was this decision that led to Leonard killing Jimmy Grant, killing Teddy, and being manipulated by Natalie, all because Leonard chose to uphold his identity as a person whose wife was raped and murdered and who is out to get justice on the man that did it. In Perfect Blue, Mima reacts wholly opposite to Leonard. She is firmly opposed to the idea of returning to her pop idol job in spite of the many messages she receives saying that the new career path she has chosen isn't her. And as she continues to push away her old identity, it pushes back on her even harder, infecting her mind and wearing down her resolve. However, even after the extraordinary amount of shit that the movie puts Mima through, and boy does it put her through a lot of shit, she retains the strength to hold on tightly to the identity that she has forged by herself for herself, regardless of how some people may feel about that. And it is for this, for holding on to her ideals and not being swayed by the box that others tried to put her in, that Mima is rewarded both with success in her career, but more importantly, with mental clarity, gaining assuredness in her new identity. When considering Perfect Blue and Memento through this lens, they begin to resemble two sides of the same coin. On one hand, we have a character who willingly acts accordingly to the identity that has been presented to them, and consequently is punished by being kept in the same destructive loop that he has been stuck in for who knows how long. And on the other hand, we have a character who fights tooth and nail to escape the identity that the world tries to force upon her, and as a result, reaps the rewards of that effort by obtaining the identity that makes her most happy. We, the audience, are warned of the dangers of mindlessly conforming to the set of rules that the outside world puts on us, and also shown the benefits that we may achieve through finding our own identity. It is very easy and tempting to put ourselves in boxes, to put labels on ourselves that define who we are and how we act, because doing so allows us to lighten the load of choice. When you have a predefined guideline about how to live your life, making choices simply becomes easier because you don't have to put in any real thought. That kid with the glasses needs a lab partner, but I'm a football player and athletes don't hang out with nerds, so I'll just find someone else. My friend recommended me this cartoon, but I'm an adult and cartoons are made for kids, so I'll just not watch it. I want to ask out that guy I work with, but I'm a girl and girls aren't supposed to be the initiators in a relationship, so I'll just wait for him to approach me. Obviously, this isn't to say that we should reject identitarianism entirely. There are, of course, plenty of instances wherein using this identity heuristic is beneficial, and moreover, it is simply unreasonable to expect everyone to constantly be considering whether or not the choices they make are in some way influenced by external sets of behavioral rules, and to consider whether or not those rules are reasonable in themselves. That's just the limitation of being human.
So you lie to yourself to be happy. There's nothing wrong with that. We all do it.
I understand that the picture I'm painting about each of these movies is largely extrapolating information from the comparison of both Memento and Perfect Blue, rather than looking at either of them on their own. And so, I suppose that I should address the question of whether or not I think each of these films are about identitarianism. Now, I think that each movie on its own is quite applicable to this topic, but I certainly think that both Christopher Nolan and Satoshi Kon each had their sights set on a very different thematic target. And there are no shortage of analytical videos on this platform deconstructing those themes individually. I was only able to pull the meaning out of these films that I did because I considered each of their stories together. Some might say that this is a pointless endeavor, seeing as neither one of the head creators of these movies intended for their work to be so heavily compared to one of such staggering difference. But isn't that what we do with every piece of media we consume, to at least some extent? We internalize the message it is trying to teach us, then consciously or not compare it to other works of art down the line. The human brain is a comparison machine after all. These movies do not exist in a vacuum and no one can possibly experience them as such. And if comparing them in this way allows us to glean new meaning from them, however unintended, I don't see how that can be a bad thing, especially when it enhances my enjoyment of each of these works works of art. Case in point, I actually wasn't that enthusiastic about Memento upon finishing it for the first time, and only came to really like it after exploring its relationship with Perfect Blue. I thought that the ending was pretty unsatisfying because I never felt like any of the major questions about Leonard's past were answered. Teddy was set up at the beginning of the film to be an untrustworthy source of information, so I was doubting everything that came out of his mouth in the conversation he has with Leonard at the end of the film. Furthermore, the picture that is supposedly of Leonard right after he killed the original John G is pretty sus. When I imagine the face of someone who just got revenge on his wife's murder/rapist, I do not imagine this goofy ass smile. I've seen many people argue that Memento is a better film for introducing so much ambiguity into its narrative because it puts the viewer more into Leonard's shoes. And while I can appreciate that, I just don't enjoy being left with so many loose ends not being tied up. And that's actually why I enjoyed Perfect Blue more, especially on the first watch. As soon as we see Rumi's reflection in the mirror of the real Mima, the aspects of the film which had been a mystery up until that point click into place. Suddenly, you connect the dots that Rumi was the online Mima taking advantage of Mamoru's obsession over her to get him to try to dispose of our protagonist. Additionally, it makes far more sense why Rumi was against the shift in Mima's public image and why she has such a strong reaction to seeing the work Mima goes on to do. And it clears up who was actually responsible for the numerous murders that take place throughout the course of the film. And in my opinion, Perfect Blue only becomes more positive after breaking it down in the way I have, which I think is justification enough to make a video like this. Besides, the odds that two films so different in construction could end up being so similar is novel enough, but the odds that I would watch each of these films on 2 consecutive nights more than 2 decades after each of them were made, all out of sheer happenstance, is pretty spectacular if you ask me, and very worthy of documentation. Moreover, it's situations I find myself in like this that make me really appreciate how unique an individual's experience with cinema can be from everyone else. If IMDb and Mal are anything to go off of in terms of the number of people who cared enough about these films to document that they had seen them, that's about for Memento and for Perfect Blue. Given the differences in medium culture and time of release, I feel confident saying that the number of people who have simply seen both of these movies is in the tens of thousands. Out of those people, how many made a conscious comparison between the two? And out of those people, how many were interested enough in that comparison that they would script, voice edit, and upload an entire YouTube video about it? Obviously, those kinds of statistics are impossible to know for sure. This is merely a thought experiment, but I hope it inspires you to appreciate your unique experience with watching movies, listening to music, playing video games, etc. Because each of us is different. Each of us has a unique experience, and by exploring those experiences, each of us can better understand our own individual identity.
Hey there, it's me. Thank you very much for watching that video, but before you click away, I thought I would take this opportunity to let you guys know that my aunt and her friend actually recently started up a podcast where they are rewatching and analyzing the entirety of the show Supernatural. It's called Salt and Burn This. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, a bunch of other services, so I'll put the link in the description. You should go check it out. It's really good. Anyway, that's about it. Twitter, second channel, Patreon, hit all the YouTube buttons, you know the drill, and I will see you in the next one.